Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're talking about something incredible, the molecules that literally hold you together. They are the unsung heroes building the very walls of every single one of your cells.
So let's just jump right in with a big question. Think about it. You have trillions of cells. What's stopping them all from just dissolving into a big mush? What's the barrier that separates what's alive inside the cell from everything else on the outside?
Well, the answer is something called the cell membrane. And you can think of it as this amazing, flexible, almost intelligent container that holds all the machinery of life inside.
But here's the thing, it's not just some simple plastic bag. We're talking about an incredibly dynamic, super important structure, and it's all built from one extraordinary type of molecule. So it's time to meet the star of our show, the phospholipid. Yep, this tiny but mighty molecule is what makes all of this possible. You know, the design of a phospholipid it's brilliantly simple. It's got this phosphate head group that's hydrophilic, which is just a fancy way of saying it absolutely loves water. Then it has these two fatty acid pails that are hydrophobic. They're terrified of water. So this simple three-part structure gives it this really powerful kind of two-faced personality.
And that dual nature, that is the secret sauce. See, in the watery environment inside our bodies, physics just takes over. It's way more energy efficient for these molecules to line up in a specific way. The water-loving heads, they naturally face outwards towards all the water, and the water-hating tails, they tuck themselves safely inside, hiding from it. And just like that, you get a perfect barrier that assembles itself. It's amazing!
Okay, so how does your body actually make these things? It's got to build them, right? Well, it turns out it has two main strategies, kind of like a manufacturing plant, to keep this crucial supply chain running.
And this whole system just shows you how incredibly efficient our cells are. You've got the Kennedy pathway, which is like the big factory floor churning out brand new phospholipids from scratch. But then you have the Lanz pathway, and that's more like the custom repair shop. It's all about remodeling, tweaking, and recycling the ones we already have to meet very specific needs.
Right. Now, think about it. You wouldn't build an entire house out of just, say, wood, right? You need concrete, glass, steel. Well, the cell is the same way. It doesn't use just one type of phospholipid. It has this whole diverse family of them, and each one has a very specific job to do.
So, if we take a peek at a typical cell membrane, you can see one type is the undisputed king of the castle, phosphatidylcholine, or PC for short. It makes up more than half of the whole thing. It's really the main structural workhorse in a lot of membranes. But that recipe changes depending on where you are in the cell and what job needs to get done. For instance, the endoplasmic reticulum, that's the cell's main factory, remember, it's packed with that workhorse, PC. But then you go over to the mitochondria, the cell's power plants, and it is a completely different story. Their inner membrane relies heavily on this super specialized phospholipid called Cardiolipin, and you pretty much won't find it anywhere else. So here's the key takeaway. Just by changing the recipe, the mix of these different molecules, the cell can build structures with wildly different properties and functions. It's all perfectly tailored for whatever it needs to do, whether that's producing energy or sending signals. Which, of course, brings us to a really critical question. What happens when this super intricate assembly line breaks down? Given how fundamental these molecules are, you can imagine the consequences can be, profound. Let's take our lungs, for example. For them to work right, they need this special coating called pulmonary surfactant. And guess what? It's about 80% a very specific kind of phospholipid. This stuff is what keeps the tiny little air sacs in our lungs from collapsing every time we breathe out. So if there isn't enough of it, like in some premature infants, they can develop a really life-threatening condition called respiratory distress syndrome. This process is so critical, in fact, that doctors can actually track how well a baby's lungs are developing before birth. They do it by measuring the ratio of two molecules in the amniotic fluid. Lecithin, that's the key phospholipid we're talking about, and another one called sphingomyelin. It's called the LS ratio. A healthy ratio is 2.0 or higher. That tells you the lungs are mature, they're ready to go. But if the production of that crucial phospholipid starts to lag, and the ratio drops below 2.0, well, the risk of that infant's lungs collapsing becomes incredibly high. It's just a stunningly direct link, right? The production of one single type of molecule and a literal life or death function. And it's not just about our first breath either.
This importance continues throughout our entire lives, all the way down to our cellular power plants, the mitochondria.
Remember that special phospholipid we mentioned, cardiolipin? Well, it is absolutely essential for our mitochondria to work efficiently and produce energy. There's a gene called Tafazzin that's responsible for remodeling and maintaining it. And when that gene is mutated, it leads to a really serious disorder called Barth syndrome, which tragically affects the heart and muscles.
So, when you think about it, from our very first breath to every single beat of our heart, we are completely dependent on this constant, invisible construction project, the building and rebuilding of phospholipids. It kind of makes you stop and think about the incredible molecular engineering that's happening inside of you right this second just to keep you going.